Hey everyone, I'm Cosmic and welcome to the Cloud. As expected, we got another Splatoon Raiders trailer in the recent Nintendo Direct. Less expected was the 20 minutes of Nintendo Treehouse footage and the announcement of an entire Direct dedicated solely to this game. Now, if I can be honest, we're reaching the point where I honestly don't want to overanalyze every bit of footage we have, as I do want to go into the game somewhat blind, but I still have some thoughts I'd like to share on this new info. So let's jump in. The new trailer actually didn't show us much that we don't already know. For non-Splatoon fans, this was the first time the game was shown off in a general showcase, so I guess they just wanted to keep the explanation simple. The Nintendo Treehouse footage, on the other hand, not only gives us a better understanding of the objective structure and gameplay loop, but it also provides some tiny lore hints. First, we get a maybe not so tiny hint from Fry upon seeing the first enemies in the game. Whoa, were these islands the site of a salmonid turf war? I'm honestly not completely sure what led Fry to this assumption. I guess it's just the different look of the Spiralite salmonids. Either way, the developers put that line there for a reason, and it's probably the best lead we have so far for the major lore behind Raiders' story. It could even be implying that there was a conflict between the salmonids of Ancadia/the Splatlands and these salt-covered islander salmonids. That might explain the differences between the structures on the surface of these Spiralite islands and the civilization below. It's hard to say at the moment. The use of the term turf war is interesting too, because this is referring to a real turf war, not the fun and games of modern Inkling society, but an actual violent power struggle between two groups of people. And of course, the Inklings have their own history with this type of conflict. I want to say it's notable that the game draws attention to this. While this is a distinction being made between the protagonist and enemies, it also serves as a point of comparison. Of course, the protag then proceeds to kill them without a second thought, but this is more consideration than the salmonids are usually given, and it definitely feels like they're planting the seeds for a bigger lore drop later in the game. After the tutorial sequence, we're shown the hideout ship, which, as we suspected, serves as a hub area where the player can upgrade gear, craft gadgets, and talk to Deepcut. According to the host of the Nintendo Treehouse, after the helicopter crash seen in the game's opening cutscene, there is a 30-day time skip during which the mechanic built the entire hideout ship.
So you're their mechanic, and 30 days ago, while you were looking for treasure, you crash landed on the Spiralite Islands, and this is your hideout ship.
So you're playing as the mechanic, who is mostly responsible for everything that you see here on the base. Kind of a mechanical genius. You know, deep cut isn't, that's not their forte, so most of what you see built here was the mechanic.
What's interesting about this is how it ties into another announcement from the Direct. There will be a Splatoon Raiders comic series on Nintendo Today, with one comic releasing daily for the 30 days leading up to launch. In other words, we'll be getting updates on the activities of Deepcut and the mechanic in real time for the 30 days they're stranded on the island before the story takes place. That's pretty cool. It's very similar to the Squid Sisters Stories, a web serial that ran in the weeks leading up to Splatoon 2. For anyone who hasn't read the Squid Sisters stories, I would say they're surprisingly good, easily better than the writing in the actual game anyway. With that said, I'm not expecting too much from Deepcut's Island Misadventures. There's a good chance these will just be simple gags like the Mellow Squid comics, especially with there being 30 of them. But I certainly wouldn't complain if they turned out to be something more substantial. If you don't want to download Nintendo Today, or if you're worried about seeing these comics once and then never again, because this app was designed by people who somehow both love and hate media preservation, don't worry. Arden plans to upload the comics to their website, splatoonlore.inc, and I'm sure they'll also be archived on Inkopedia. On the topic of lore that's easy to miss, there's a particular detail revealed to us by the Treehouse that I haven't seen many people talking about. In both of the Raiders gameplay trailers, there's a clip of the game's map screen, with this visual effect of fog being cleared away to reveal new locations. At first, I didn't think much of this, because this is just a common piece of video game design language to show which parts of the game world the player has explored. But apparently, this fog is actually diegetic. It's mentioned by Fry in the new trailer, and from the hideout ship, we can see that some of the islands in the background are obfuscated by a thick layer of fog. These Spiralite Islands already seem to be playing into this idea of Splatoon's Bermuda Triangle, a mysterious section of the ocean travelers pass through only to crash and disappear. And personally, I think the fog will be a part of this mystery, somehow tying into the flash of light that generates the tornado in the game's intro. The Treehouse host also mentioned this.
Yeah, and you can see we got some particular floaty physics here in the Spiral Light Island, something keeping you in the air and afloat for a little bit longer than you normally would.
Now, obviously they're describing the gameplay here. After jumping off the exploration bot, the player floats down slowly, with visible spiralite shard particles spinning beneath them. But there's something about the wording here that gives me pause. They don't say that these floaty physics are exclusive to Splatoon Raiders, but that this property is unique to the Spiralite Islands. Of course, and I say this with no intended disrespect to the people running Nintendo Treehouse, they do stumble over their words quite a bit throughout the presentation.
So Deep Cut is a member of a 3 group.
But you know, that's our demo.
Okay, so I'm gonna take this back.
Awesome.
So, you know, playing semantics with the specific wording of phrases to interpret lore is probably not the best idea, I fully admit that. However, weird localized physics are not a new concept for the Splatoon series, and if there's salt in the rocks, salt in the water, and salt in the fish, it's probably safe to say there's salt in the air. And do you know what sea fog is? It's when water vapor condenses around salt in the air. Normally, this wouldn't really mean anything. Obviously, a set of tropical islands would have a lot of fog, but knowing that this fog is somehow story relevant, likely serving as a barrier to our progress, and that spiralite, a crystalline material, seems to have some kind of power used to craft stronger weapons, and that salt just generally seems to be a major motif in this game, there's maybe something there. I think the fog is important, that's all I'm saying. Food for thought. Moving on from salt lore to salt gameplay, let's take another look at that treehouse clip. We've seen this move before, in the previous Raiders trailer, where the mechanic jumps off the exploration bot. Some people initially confused this with the mid-air jump relic power, since both appeared in the same trailer, but it's clear now that they are not the same. The bot hop, as it's seemingly called, is an ability the player has access to from the very start, and it's clearly an evolution of the Pearl Drone Glide from Side Order. The Drone Glide, in my opinion, was actually pretty disappointing. During Side Order's tutorial climb, the game forces you to use the glide in order to reach a splat zone. This is the only time the game does that. In every other instance, it's an optional tool that can sometimes be used to navigate levels, but it mostly just serves as an eject button during combat. It can be fun, but it's very limited in its uses. From the offset, the bot hop already seems more interesting, since you can effectively summon a spring wherever you want on the level. Additionally, you can fire your weapon while gliding, which means it's much more practical to use this move offensively. And they demonstrate in the treehouse that you can still cancel the glide with swim form. Again though, my main issue with the glide in Side Order wasn't the glide, it was the level design. The good news is that we've actually seen a few examples of the bot hop's implementation. The treehouse team made a point to demonstrate this uninkable wall that can only be climbed using the hop, which allows the player to collect some bonus shards. We're also shown that certain stage objects, like these plants, can be used to trigger the same effect. Later in the level, they pass by this tiny island. We don't get to see them explore it, but it appears the only way to get over there would be to bot hop and glide over the water. For an early level, I would say this is a good sign. Unlike Side Order, the glide mechanic isn't being explicitly taught to the player. Instead, the level rewards experimenting with the game's movement and thoroughly searching the stage. This is similar to how Sunken Scrolls and Sardinium collectibles were hidden in Splatoon 1 and 2, and I'm personally really happy to see this kind of secret hunting return. Still, I hope later levels actually have some significant platforming built into them. I would love to see actual challenges made with the bot hop and glide in mind. If not in the overworld, I at least hope we get to see something like that in the dungeons. Jumping back to collectibles, there's actually a pretty good chance that Secret Island contains a Sunken Scroll. In case you missed it, when they hover over the raid in the treehouse footage, we see the classic Sunken Scroll icon. So yeah, scrolls are confirmed. Honestly, I do prefer when each story has its own unique method to communicate lore, like the memcakes, chat logs, alternalogs, and dev diaries, but considering we also have the treasures in Raiders, I'm pretty happy to see the scrolls return as an additional source of information. Something I'm honestly kinda surprised to see is that the player's completion time is tracked for each raid. It's just a statistic, so there's nothing wrong with it being there, but I guess the raids we've seen so far don't look all that speedrunnable to me. At least not by playing the game the intended way. You know, approaching groups of enemies to trigger a fight, whittling down every last one, and grabbing the collectibles. During the treehouse, we see that the bot automatically scans for treasure at the start of a raid, placing beacons on spiralite deposits. The hosts state that the beacon with the spiral is the final one that ends the level. However, it isn't specified whether or not you need to collect the other deposits first. On a casual playthrough, you're definitely going to want to collect everything, since splatting enemies rewards you with EXP and materials for crafting gadgets. But what I'm wondering is whether or not a speedrun of Splatoon Raiders will consist of running past every single enemy encounter and snagging the treasure at the end of the stage. It just seems weird to me that in a game with such a focus on combat, there would be an in-game timer encouraging you to not interact with the enemies. Am I overthinking this? I'm probably overthinking this. Regardless, this is yet another reason why I hope these levels start having more going on in them when it comes to movement, because yeah, I'm still a little afraid of how flat and basic they look. To be fair, I am excited to see the different combat gimmicks. For example, the propeller plants I mentioned earlier, and this blue flower that unleashes a freezing AoE attack when shot. Also on the topic of gameplay, we now know for sure that the green bar at the bottom of the screen is for the player's health. This does make sense because, unlike past Splatoon games, your HP actually gets upgraded the more enemies you splat, so it would be pretty hard to intuit how much damage you took just from the ink on the edges of the screen. Plus, having a visual indicator for broken armor repair is actually really nice. The orange meter, as we suspected, is for charging a showstopper ability, a special attack performed by your selected deep cut member. It's interesting that it charges based on power eggs rather than inking turf, but with how often you'll be getting eggs in this game, I guess it makes sense. Additionally, we learned that leveling up rewards you with skill points, which can be used to upgrade basic stats, gadget part slots, and the limiter. Dedicated lore fans will remember the single other time in the series the limiter was mentioned, the Agent 3 fight in Octo Expansion. There, it was implied that Agent 3 removed the limiter, allowing them to quickly charge a variety of specials. This was not a concept that had been established previously, and it has not been elaborated on since, but I would assume the limiter in Raiders is the same thing. Maybe we'll finally get a better explanation for what was going on with that. But for now, that's just about it. Overall, I still think the game is looking pretty great. The biggest questions now are how the story will turn out and what's going on with dungeons. It seems like dungeons can consist of combat, platforming, or more specific objectives like collecting eggs under a time limit. We know that they apparently can have sub-levels and that there's a menu for them on the map screen. We don't know anything else, like how to access them, if they're found during raids, how long they are, or if they give you different rewards. I expect to learn a lot more from the upcoming Raiders Direct, along with some more details on how playing co-op works, and Nintendo finally telling us what the amiibo do. And maybe, just maybe, we'll get a smidgen of story. Just a little bit, please. Until then, that'll be all from me. Well, actually, I'm definitely playing Deltarune Chapter 5 next week and making a video, but most of you probably don't care about that. You should, though. You should play Deltarune and Undertale. Not in that order. Anyway, thanks for watching. This has been Cosmic. Farewell.